How can we make the world better? By making ourselves better. The Dr. Joe Show explores how you can make positive personal change by using his groundbreaking and highly effective I Am approach to understand who we are and why we do what we do. Your small changes can have big effects.
Join us now for the Dr. Joe Show with Mark Stiles of Stiles Law and your host, Dr. Joe Schrand.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Dr. Joe Show.
Nicely done, Mark. Welcome back. Welcome back.
Yeah, glad to be back.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's been a fascinating couple of weeks, though, hasn't it?
Yeah, a lot of things going on right now.
Oof. A lot of things going on in the world. So how are you doing, Mark? Haven't seen you. What's been going on?
Good. Doing real well. Things are good. Family's good. Work is good. Feeling healthy. Things are good, Dr. Joe. How about you? Are you on the New York Times bestseller list yet?
Hopefully we'll be there any day. If all goes
Any day?
Well, we don't know, but Unleashing the Power of Respect, the I Am approach. My new book just came out a couple of weeks ago. That it's actually getting some good traction. So I'm very proud of it. And just, having people pick it up and read it. PMC, is that happening? The Pan Mass?
Oh, yeah. We're actually adding a day this year. My team is going to pull off what we're referring to as day 0. So we're going to do the full state of Massachusetts. We're going to start at the border of New York on Friday and then go into Sturbridge, where it typically starts on Saturday, and then do the rest of the Pan Mass.
How much money have you guys raised over the years?
Oh, a lot. Lots and lots. And there's still a lot more to be raised because cancer is still there, although they're treating it and doing some amazing research. It's still there, and we're going to keep pedaling until it's gone.
Good for you. Well, thanks a lot for all that service. It's so important.
Oh, thank you.
Great. How can people donate to Pan Mass and with you in particular?
Well, the website is pmc.org. And if you search for a writer, I'd be grateful for any donations, but there's a lot of folks that are writing, but pmc.org. And it talks all about what they've done and how much they've raised. I think they raised $60 million last year for a 1-weekend event. Yeah, it's really something. It's spectacular. The whole event is so well run.
Yeah.
Like I've mentioned it, it's straight gratitude. Volunteers, spectators, riders, it's just one love,
Yeah, well, really appreciate you doing that with all your colleagues as well, and for all the Pan Mass folks. Thanks so much for writing it for this cause. Tom, what's going on with you?
Well, all things considered, Dr. Joe, I cannot complain. It's like I said, it's been a real hit the fan kind of week. I shout out to, well, it's strange to say shout out, but thoughts and prayers are all I can kind of give at the moment to the people of Ukraine. Yeah. There was a photographer that I met at Cannes who I've gotten pretty close with family just in the suburbs of Kiev.
Ooh.
And it's rough. I make sure to keep in touch with her, make sure our family's all right, but sometimes they're just blackouts.
Yeah. No, it's a scary time for the world and for our colleagues in Ukraine, and we have to have faith, but we also have to recognize it's an I Am. We just don't have to like it, but what can we do to change it? We have to be able to change it. We have to bring people together. We have to bring people together, and respect is really the key. Respect and value. It may be really hard to understand why people do what they do, but rather than judge them, let's step back and look again at why they do what they do based on the influence of the 4 domains. And really that includes the way people are portrayed in the media, which is a big part of what we're going to be talking about tonight. So with that in mind, Tom, could you please introduce our guest for tonight?
Well, Dr. Joe, I had the honor of taking part in a project, a feature-length documentary chronicling portrayals of autism in the media, firsthand accounts from people on the spectrum themselves about these portrayals, and some of the pseudoscience and myths behind it, some of the negativity around it, some of the positivity as well. You know, it's a two-sided coin. But with no further ado, Spectrum Director, Anna Charest.
Hello.
Thanks for being here, Anna. Really appreciate it. We'll be talking with you. And our other guest tonight, Tom McCoy.
Well, we are welcoming back autism expert and a little friend of yours, Dr. Joe, Dr. Gagan Joshi.
That's so true. Thank you so much for coming back, Dr. Joshi. And I'm really looking forward to this discussion tonight, because the two of you, are our thought leaders in how we really are going to address the way people are viewing autism. So, Anna, why don't we start? Tell us a little bit about yourself, if you will, but also how you got interested in this remarkable project.
Well, I went to school at Champlain College for filmmaking, and I remember taking a filmmaking documentary filmmaking class in my sophomore year. And for the longest time, it's not that I didn't like documentaries, it's just they never really captured my interest as much as fictional movies. But this time I made a documentary about a local charity that does environmental activism, 350.org. They have a chapter in Burlington, Vermont. And then I realized, I can really reach people. I can reach people about all these really important subjects. And college is when I started to really do some self-assessment, as a lot of people will say. I was diagnosed with Asperger syndrome, which is now an outdated term, when I was 4 years old. But my mother my parents decided they wouldn't tell me until I was a little bit older, like when I was 7, 8, because they didn't want me going to kindergarten thinking I was different. Which, I mean, fair enough. That's a very difficult age to be told you're different. That's it. And
Wow.
Well, I didn't really get it because, I got it, but I wasn't too happy with it because this was about 2003. This is the year when there were Autism Speaks PSAs everywhere. I remember this was also around the same time there was some got milk autism PSAs, where it's like, does your child got autism? And it was correlating and now debunked theory that milk and lactose can induce autism in children.
Yeah, and gluten.
Huh. And that was 2003. Dr. Joshi, you were already interested in this field around then, were you not? When did you start?
Well, I started in 2003. I was as a fellow, and
Yeah.
I was interested in the field while I was in child, working with my colleagues and working on mood disorders. I realized that there were these children who were not only having emotional difficulties or attention problems, but they had this kind of social challenges and difficulties, which sometimes were the source of their emotional dysregulation. And that made me curious about them, because once we treated their emotional difficulty, we still found them struggling and oftentimes becoming depressed. That's when we realized that there's more to it. And in the social realm, there's something they're struggling with the social dance. And I'm going to ask you, I'm just curious, I'm a psychiatrist, and psychiatrists have a tendency to ask questions. One of the things I've noticed that everybody has a very different response to when they come to know they have autism spectrum or Asperger's. And some of them do feel relieved that at least some things now make sense. Why do I behave this way? Or why do I act in a certain way? Did that bring some clarity to you in some ways, or was it something as a stigma?
Actually, it was both. I always felt like I was sort of the odd one out in early elementary school, and then my mother explained it to me, and I'm like, well, that explains it, but I'm not happy, because this is also around the time when there was a lot of we will find a cure for autism, march to find a cure for autism. And, this is also around the same time when it was fun to pick on the special needs kids at school and use the R slur. So I thought, oh God, I'm dead. I'm going to spend the rest of my high school years, my elementary school and school years being the target of ridicule. I hate this. I hate this. Why'd I have to be born this way? I was just filled with so much self-loathing, and it wasn't just me. It's like in 6th grade, I had a teacher who would often single me and other kids with 504s and IEPs out. She would accuse us of not paying attention, not doing homework, not understanding, and our parents had to intervene, say, stop singling out our kids, give them a chance. She goes, well, if any child has an IEP, they belong in special ed. And it was her last year of like teaching. She's about to retire, and I guess she just wanted an easy ride during her last year and presumed that we'd be problems. And that just fueled such an internalized ableism in me. And I even started to lash out at other special needs kids, because I thought that, you know, their existence, dare I say, was the reason why I was being criticized by my peers and by my teachers. I mean, and as an adult, I understand I was projecting, but it was still very hard. I felt like, you know, and I just felt like autism was a stigma. It was something derogatory. I tried to I pretty much mastered the art of masking. I tried everything I could to be the good student, the mature student, the kid who understood sarcasm, the social student. And I even came to a point where I would actually flex it against other autistic students, which was not fair of me. But again, it's actually what led to me wanting to make this documentary. It's that growing up, it was always a joke, a tragedy, something only boys had in media. And I thought, if maybe I grew up with more positive visions of autism in media, or maybe more girls I could relate to, or maybe it was portrayed not as this burden to be handled with or cured, but just something to live with, would I have been treated that way? Would I have felt that way about myself and others? Like, I take full responsibility for my actions, but it's something that I think about a lot.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it is, even the concept of special needs can somehow be derogatory. But Dr. Joshi, let me just go to you for a moment. You've worked with spectrum folks for years now. Is there something about media and stigma just in general, the way Anna was talking about?
So I would like to hear Anna what stigma she's talking about, because as I was talking to you earlier about that, I see the way autism is portrayed in the media. There's autism portrayed in the media, which is obviously stated as autism, and then there is autism portrayed in the media without being stated as autism. The different movies. I actually use the autism portrayed in media as one of my ways of describing this very non-verbal disorder. Actually, autism is such a non-verbal disorder that you have to experience it by meeting people who have it. And when I'm teaching fellows, it's hard to describe what exactly autism is. And when I give them examples of movies, like I'm from an old time person, like Rain Man, that is one autism. Napoleon Dynamite is another autism. Big Bang Theory is another autism. And when I talk,
what about the Good Doctor, right? Isn't the Good Doctor
or Data?
Right. I mean, it's portrayed a certain way. Go on. I didn't mean to cut you off, Joshi.
So I just use these different, because I think spectrum is such a spectrum that, you know, it presents in so many different ways. So I try to sort of give them a sense of what this disorder feels like, because it can't be described just in plain, simple words. Having said that, I see a huge struggle in the autism community, and I'm bringing this up, is this whole concept of, like, somebody called Asperger's, as Anna was, now that has been robbed and it's called autism spectrum disorder. Then the whole idea of continuum of a disorder and the general population and neurodiversity. I think this has become a big struggle. And I feel like that we need to break out of this kind of a dichotomous mold and see that these autistic traits are omnipresent in the society in various degrees. Everybody has some traits. I say this again and again, that if I use a screener of autism in the audience of 1,000 people, nobody's going to come out zero on autistic traits. Everybody will have some
Interesting.
traits, and they will be different in different people. But it is the accumulation of number and the severity of traits, which, if it causes impairment, that's when we come in. That's where the help comes in. And that continuum, I think it helps not to see the special ed. I do not like the special ed in many different ways. One is it segregates them. Second is person who's socially struggling, they are in a milieu of kids who are very socially challenging for them. So it makes their social struggle worse at times. And I'm assuming you're intellectually very capable. These kids are intellectually very capable, and they're around people who usually oftentimes are intellectually also struggling. So that creates a very kind of a sort of the struggle you and I described, is surrounded by people who you're not able to relate to. And then the whole idea that I don't belong with them. I mean, there's a huge struggle going on that Asperger should have been kept as a category. I always tell people that do not talk about the diagnostic categories or the labels. Talk about your uniqueness. And Anna, as you said, that autism, you don't have to overcome the whole autism. You just have to work enough to overcome the struggles in autism, and you be who you are. And part of you is autism. You're not, everything is not autism in you. It is an aspect of you which is autism, which you constantly work on.
So,
What do you think, Anna? How does that relate to you?
well, there's a lot I can say about that. Well, I personally am not a big fan of the whole idea that we're all a little autistic. I mean, I know that everyone has traits that we see as autistic, but autism is a neurodivergent makeup. So by saying we're all a little autistic kind of erases that. It's like saying we're all descended from Africa. That doesn't really undo that doesn't really undo this Jim Crow era. It just kind of sounds like you're kind of trying to distract from that. And as for stigma, well, let's see. Well, let's see. So I have a lot to say about this in general. Like, I agree that we shouldn't really use dichotomy, because for a long time, again, I was really insecure. I took comfort in the fact that I was high functioning autistic by saying that, well, at least I'm not low functioning, at least I'm not like this. But the whole functioning label dichotomy is actually toxic for both people. For high functioning, they have to live up to the expectation that they're high functioning all the time, which can lead to burnout. And as for low functioning people, it dismisses them before they even have a chance to really show who they are, what they're capable of. And I realize now how toxic that is. As for getting rid of Asperger syndrome in the DSM, I'm kind of okay with that after doing some more research about Hans Asperger and how he basically did his research and the children that suffered at his hands. I'm not sure if this is common knowledge for people on this who listen to this. I'm not quite sure how I can get into it. It's very dark, but
Go ahead, Anna. That's what the
Okay.
Dr. Joe show is about. Let's go.
all right. Well, for a long time, Hans Asperger was almost likened to Oscar Schindler. He saved these children's lives. He got to know them. He learned about Asperger syndrome, about autism spectrum disorder. But in reality, he colluded with the Nazi Party. A lot of his funding came from the Nazi Party, and his studies were basically ways to make autistic children easier to handle, and dare I say even less autistic, bring out the good traits and get rid of the bad traits. Basically, he wanted to make them grow up and to become obedient little Nazi scientists who could use their STEM skills to aid the party. And if they were unteachable, he arranged for them to be sent to the camps.
Or Spiegelgrunds, which was the fun term is child killing facility. But for those who are interested in the macabre side of history, the book Asperger's Children by Edith Schaeffer goes into graphic detail on the man and his work.
I started to read that and I had to take a break. It was so dark.
It is, yeah.
I will be using that as a source for my documentary when I go over the part about functioning labels and how Asperger syndrome was thrown around in media a lot and why it's suddenly not being used in media. I'm kind of not comfortable using the name of a Nazi scientist anymore. I just prefer to say I'm on the spectrum. It doesn't have a functioning label and no one knows where I am. They have to get to know me.
Interesting. Well, I certainly appreciate the wisdom that you're sharing with us and the history. You too, Tom. When you think, well, let me ask you this way. How do you see yourself? How would you describe yourself, Anna?
Well, I'm on the spectrum, but I could easily pass for someone who's neurotypical. And to some people, that's a privilege because I don't know, like even as a kid, I was very social. Eye contact wasn't a really big issue for me. I actually like to try new foods. I mean, I still had some sensory issues here and there. Usually, like when I was younger, I was almost too social. I guess that's where the social cues didn't come in. Like I guess you can say invasive with people's personal space. Maybe I asked too many impersonal questions. Maybe I got too excited. And there was a time when I didn't understand sarcasm, but then I turned 13 and then that's all I spoke. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Was that sarcastic?
Perhaps.
I'm kidding. Sorry.
But honestly, like as I've gotten older, I'm not saying I outgrew my autism. It's like as I grew, certain things I don't struggle with anymore. Like as an adult, I am just like the most dry, sarcastic person you'll ever work with, to the point where my coworkers even think I'm being serious.
That's a skill. It's a skill to have.
It is. It does get frustrating when you realize you might have overshot your sarcasm ability.
Has that ever happened to you, Tom?
Never.
And I think also working in retail has allowed me to filter myself because trust me, there was a lot I wanted to say during my retail days I did not say.
Anna, can I ask you one question? As you grow older, and I'm very interested in this. Did you overcome, if you had any sensory dysregulation, did you overcome that to some extent? Did it become a little bit less intense, less severe?
That's actually kind of a weird thing that sort of changed but stayed the same. When I was younger, a lot of sensory used to hype me up, maybe because I was a kid. Like loud music, I would just run around, bounce off the walls. And then I started developing depression when I was a teenager. And it wasn't really manageable until 2019 when I found the right antidepressants. And now a lot of sensory actually kind of drains me. I don't melt down, I shut down. It's like, I can't do this. I don't have the energy to deal with this. It also can kind of stress me out, but again, it's not to the point where I'm like screaming, crying, self-harming, having a seizure, thank God. I just say, I'm really drained. Can we just move someplace else? It's also why I actually don't like being in restaurants when it's busy. Something about being surrounded by chatter just is too much. And when I'm on the phone at my job, I say, do you have me on speaker? Can you take me off? There's a lot of background noise.
Yeah. Well, no, the ability to tolerate different sensory stimuli is critical. Anna, does the documentary have a name? Have you got a name for it yet?
Well, the working title is literally Spectrum, but we were thinking about maybe adding a subtitle like Autism in Media or something like that.
Yeah, and you've been interviewing different people. I know you interviewed Tom. How are you finding your folks to interview?
Well, I have a great producer who was great at networking. I found some blogs. Some people blog about their autism experiences, and there's also some YouTubers. I contacted a few of them. That's how I actually got an interview with an autistic YouTuber called That Creepy Reading. He does a lot of like top 10 videos, mostly about like video games and horror movies and whatnot, but he did a top 9 video called Top 9 Scams That Went Too Far. And several of the scams were cures for autism. And he's like, oh yeah, this makes me feel really great about myself. People are trying to scam desperate parents into curing their autistic kids by drinking bleach. And yeah, and I had to interview him, and we talked about our own experiences. I emailed Temple Grandin, and she gave me a phone call.
Great.
Completely out of the blue, and I recorded it. And while some of what you said did remind me of stuff she said at panels before, I actually asked some things about, like, how would you react if someone said they disagree with you because such and such? And she's like, okay, I would just try to think of a new solution. It's just, she understands that, like, she's become somewhat of a controversial figure in the autism community, and I can understand why. It's not that I disagree with her, it's just that I think a lot of her teachings are based on what she grew up with. And society has changed, understandings of raising a child has changed. And she says, I have a hard time giving advice without specific examples, which is fair. I have to ask for specific examples too when it comes to giving advice.
Have you found that people don't want to talk about it because of the stigma and not wanting to reveal that they have autism?
Oh, yes. I was terrified to tell my employers I was on the spectrum. I was terrified if I told them the interview, they would not even hire me on the spot. I kept it to myself, and then they're like, why are you having a hard time listening to all these like people on speaker? And I'm like, because I have a sensory processing disorder, okay? I'm on the spectrum. And I felt backed into a corner. They're like, oh, we're so sorry. And they were very sympathetic. And they're like, I have nieces and nephews that are on the spectrum. And next time, just say, is it convenient for you to take me off the speaker? And that was that.
Well, I think, Anna, that was great, actually, that you did not front loaded that I have autism. You only brought it up when it was necessary for you to reveal it. I think that was perfect. In fact, I have the problem with my patients is that they then put that tag on, they tell everyone, I have autism. And anything they do, oh, I have autism. And I tell them everything you do is not autism. And you don't have to advertise this, that you have autism. It's a personal thing. You have to keep it to yourself. But if needed, you talk about it. So that was great.
Well, that's also a bit of a thing that, is a bit difficult for us. Like, a lot of us think that we should be able to just say I have autism and not expect a lot of backlash or to be assumed that we're going to be an issue. I felt like I had to prove myself before I could tell anyone. And in that there's a bit of the stigma there. Like, I couldn't tell I had autism in the interview because they would probably not hire me. And only until I was backed in a corner did I have to reveal that I was autistic. It's like I said, it's like, it's masking, but it's just so much. It would just be nice to say, I'm autistic or I'm on the spectrum, and people not make a big deal out of it. They just go, okay, and then continue to treat me like I'm not different.
But I'm wondering, go on, Dr. Joshi. No, go on.
I'm so curious. Anna, when you came to know about your autism, was it explained to you that what is the profile of your autism? Did you have that conversation with the doctor?
Yes, and with my mother. I was seeing a child psychologist at the time. And
yeah, I'm glad that happened, because it's important to know what exactly is your autism.
And my mother was also had the foresight to get me a bunch of children's books about autism, like, where the narrator or the author like was autistic or had Asperger's. Like, at the time it was all these kids books about about kids with Asperger's, but even as a kid, I'm like, these are all boys. All the main characters are boys. I'm like, where's the girls? And and there was also some of them I could not relate to. I'm like, Mom, I suck at math. Why am I supposed to relate to this white boy, this little skinny boy who likes math? I'm kidding.
And why are they always good at math?
I know. I hated math in school. I hated math. I was the kid who liked to draw and read books.
So Anna, once you came to know your autism and you became aware of it, did you notice any of those things in other family members in your family sharing similar challenges, some of them?
Well, that's a bit of a story in itself, is that I actually had a cousin. I just still do have a cousin who's nonverbal autistic, and he is a few years younger than me. I'm about to be 27 this Saturday.
Happy birthday.
Yeah,
Happy
thank
birthday.
you. He's almost 24, and when I was 7 years old and when he was 4 years old, he was still wearing diapers. He wore diapers all through elementary school, middle school, and high school. He still wears diapers. He only eats 4 foods. He is nonverbal. He has seizures. He breaks stuff. And to me, autism was that. And I'm like, oh God, no, I don't want to be like him. And I just thought of, and I also had another cousin who was the stereotypical weird kid who had Asperger's. So I thought, oh God, no, I'm going to be like them. I mean, as an adult now, I realize that's just a horrible thought all children seem to have. You know, I don't want to be like X member of my family, or I don't want to be the weird kid. But I mean, just as like when I was younger, I was just disgusted by the idea of autism. I know that's horrible, but as a kid, I just thought of it as like this horrible thing where you're either really weird and annoying or you're an infant.
You're
Well,
right about this, that because at that time autism meant someone who's non-verbal, like Rain Man, just closed, non-communicative, right? So that was the stereotypic understanding of autism at that time, right?
yes, but you know, I just didn't want to be like, I just didn't want to be these portrayals of people who were just, this is gonna sound so ableist, but that's how I felt. I just felt like they were handicapped, and I didn't want to be handicapped, and I didn't want to be weird. I just wanted to be me. And I felt by having this label on me, I was now lumped into them, and I was afraid everybody would see me just like them. It's why, like I said, I started acting out and lashing out at people who were also neurodivergent, even if they were on the same functioning level as me.
You're right, though. It does set the expectation that. So, for an example, I told you about this. Is often people will ask, like, "Are you on the spectrum?" Or somehow it'll come up in conversation, and I'll say, "Yes, I am." And there's one particular, I remember it was a date, said, "But you seem fine."
I had something similar. I was explaining to a classmate of mine, this is like 9th grade, by the way, that I was on the spectrum. And he goes, "But you're a girl." And I'm like, "Yes." He goes, "Girls can't be autistic." And I just walked away. I was done. I was so done. I just couldn't take
it is highly under recognized in girls. And sometimes the diagnosis is so delayed. So at some level, Anna, you're lucky that it was recognized early enough.
And I would also, like, whenever I would bring up that I had Asperger's, they'd be like, "Wait, does that mean you're a psychopath? I hear autistic people can't feel empathy." Or they would say stuff like, "Does that mean you're an R word?" Or they would say, like, they would ask me all these really weird questions, like, because I was the autistic girl, I would automatically know everything about autism. They'd be like, "What is it with R words and liking Thomas the Tank Engine?" I'd be like, "How am I supposed to know?"
So one of the things, Anna, what I noticed with autism is that with the gender comes a cultural and a social demand of the types of clothing you need to wear, the kind of makeup to put on to be that so-called girly girl. How did you address or face those challenges?
I actually didn't mind it so much. The only issue I had a problem with was corduroys, because there was a time when corduroys were everywhere, like in the late 90s, early 2000s. I didn't like the way it felt. Otherwise, I liked wearing skirts. I don't really wear them as much anymore. I liked wearing makeup to the point where Mom said, "Anna, you're going to school. You're not going to a nightclub. At least take a little bit off, just a little bit." And I liked painting my nails. I still like painting my nails. And I think I was actually mentioning this with Thomas during our interview, is that I think the biggest societal pressure is that girls are expected to be social, especially in middle school and elementary school. They're expected to have a clique. They're expected to be they're supposed to be the mature ones, dare I say. And I just made a point to try to be as social as possible, but then I burnt myself out. I was sick of people judging me before they got to know me. I was sick of having to explain myself. I was sick of people presuming the worst in me before they got to know me, especially teachers. So I basically just stopped socializing, went into my studies, and every time someone got within 2 feet of me, I'd basically swear at them to get away from me.
So Anna, if you went through that yourself, if you have a message for a 14-year-old girl who is struggling with this high functioning or the intellectually capable autism, what would you like to tell her? Is there a message you want to give her which can help her negotiate through that difficult patch which you have successfully negotiated?
All right, I would tell her that she's not alone. I know she might feel like she's alone. I feel like I was alone, but you're not alone. I mean, as an adult woman, I found so many people online that I can relate to now more than ever. Mostly, like seeing all these neurodivergent women on Facebook and on Instagram, it made me feel less alone. And when I saw Julia on Sesame Street, she's an autistic Muppet that they introduced. I just remember crying and crying and crying. Where was this little autistic Muppet girl when I needed her? Where was she when I felt invisible but also scrutinized? But then I realized that little girl is going to be there for someone else who needs her. So just know that media is changing and you will see yourself more and more in media. There's already a Pixar short called Loop about a nonverbal autistic girl, and I love it. It's just exactly what I want to see in autism portrayals in media. It's a form of the spectrum. It's a girl who's not white, because not every autistic person is white. She stims, she has sensory issues, she has meltdowns, and the whole point of the film is not let's fix her, it's just let's befriend her. And one of her other a camping mate, or like a classmate, just tries to get to know her. He doesn't try to fix her or discover the puzzle. He just is trying to spend a day with her.
And this is such a key in just being able to get to know people, to appreciate them for who they are, not who you want them to be. Mark, you've been quiet. I know you've been listening attentively, but what do you think of this discussion so far?
It's fascinating, Dr. Joe, and learning from Anna, just understanding that there's probably a lot of people out there that you may not be aware are part of this group of people, and it's quite fascinating. One of the things I did notice, though, when Dr. Joshi was going through the list of folks portrayed in the media, Anna had a reaction when he talked about Rain Man. Was that purposeful? Was there something about Rain Man that you didn't like?
Well, I kind of have a love-hate relationship with that movie. I mean, the cinematography is amazing, the score is amazing, but I feel like it's the blueprint for all the terrible portrayals in autism that persist to this day. It's about a family member learning to appreciate the autistic person, even though they're supposed to you're a burden, but I appreciate you, I understand you. It's about using the autistic person to become a better person themselves. Like, he goes from being a selfish jerk to someone who actually cares about his brother's well-being. I understand they might have gotten some things right, like the routine and the echolalia, and it's basically just like I said, it's a white guy in an institution who's a savant, who's basically used to prop up the main character, who's not autistic. A plot device autistic character, and I'm just so sick of seeing that in media. And I think it all traces back to this, and this is also something I've been thinking about. Talk about my documentary. It's a neurotypical person portraying an autistic person, and it's not like the mother of an autistic child portraying an autistic Muppet like with Julia. It's a neurotypical man portraying an autistic man who's institutionalized, and it's almost like he's lampooning what autistic people are. It's the same thing with the new horrible Sia movie, Music. She portrays an autistic girl, and she makes funny faces. She eats gum off of benches. She at one point is restrained for her own good, and it's just.
And it's a form of restraint that kills you.
Yeah, she gets sat on.
Yeah.
I mean, it's almost like, dare I say it, it's like when old school Hollywood, when they would have white people wear tons of makeup, and then suddenly they're a different race.
Oh boy. So Anna, if you have to suggest some movies where you feel that the portrayal is pretty much close to reality, which ones would you suggest? I mean, I just want your suggestion so that I can watch them and then maybe suggest others.
Well, let's see. One is Mary and Max. Even though it's a animated film and they do have a neurotypical man voice an autistic character, it's still based on a real person who existed. It's about a little girl in Australia becoming pen pals with a man in New York who's diagnosed with Asperger syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
And let's see. Another one is actually Community. Abed is autistic. You cannot tell me otherwise. And I actually relate to him a lot, mostly with my younger self.
It's called Community?
Yeah, it's a TV show that was on NBC. It's about a community college. It's kind of like those early 2010s work comedies, but this one's at a community college. And one of the characters named Abed, he's a Middle Eastern character and he's a film major, which I can appreciate. And his mannerisms remind me a lot of when I was younger, but unlike, say, Sheldon from The Big Bang Theory, the joke is he's different, let's laugh at him. The joke is more like he has a point. Like he's very, almost the joke is that like so much of what he says is so meta, so self-aware about the show itself.
But what about The Good Doctor? What do you think about that one, that portrayal?
I actually have not seen that yet. I've heard very mixed things about that from the community. Some people like that, it's a like they show meltdowns, they show that he's capable of socializing. Other people say, it's another white guy, it's another STEM field, it's another let's learn about him so we can sympathize with him, what stories. I also honestly, this is gonna sound really weird, but honestly, Encanto, the Disney movie, I actually relate to Mirabelle a lot. Like a lot of autistic people have more or less adopted Encanto as the autism allegory movie because almost all the main characters we relate to in some way. The being over, like the sensitive hearing one, the pressure to perform, masking, people taking what you say the wrong way.
Interesting. It's a terrific movie. What a great movie when everybody has these special powers, but she doesn't. Of course she does.
And a lot of people are saying I feel like when I ask people what autistic characters do you like or autism portrayals do you like, it's almost always either autism coded characters or autism allegory movies instead of outright movies about autism.
This is a terrific conversation. We could have it for so much longer, but we're running out of time. So I just want to get to the I am for a moment. So remember, the I am is saying everyone's doing the best they can, but we're influenced by 4 domains: the home, the social, the biological, and the I see. How do I see myself? How I think other people see me. We're talking a lot about all 4 of these domains. But because the domains interconnect, a small change can have a big effect. That's the first truth. Small changes can have big effects. And the second truth is everyone's interested in what you think about them, which has an effect on their biological domain. So you control no one, you influence everyone. You get to choose the kind of influence you want to be. I'm going to ask both of you these 2 questions. I'll start with you, Dr. Joshi. Small changes can have big effects. What small change can you recommend to our listeners so they can learn more or manage more about Asperger's and autism?
The small change, so I'll bring it this time from my clinical realm. A small change could be to know about your own autism and also for the family to know what autism features they share and where their features are coming from, because I strongly believe it's a highly familial disorder and the traits come from the family members, probably either mother's side or the father's, is to be aware how you're connected to your family through what common traits. This small change, I would say, that brings a big change in the interpersonal relationship within the family.
So there's a way to relate to each other and the familiarity. The other truth, you control no one, you influence everyone. You get to choose the kind of influence you want to be. Dr. Joshi, what kind of influence are you hoping to be?
I just as I told last time too, I just want to walk right behind you and enjoy the journey. And I know that I'll be influenced and I'll be influencing.
Wonderful. Anna, same two questions. Small changes can have big effects. What small change can you recommend to our listeners?
Well, I think one small change would be to look up autism media that doesn't center around the parents or guardians. Maybe look for books that were written by autistic people, maybe even autistic women. And
are there books like that? I mean, Temple Grandin's been writing some books for a long time.
yes, there's actually a book I just read. One is, let me just grab this. This is actually a book. It's written by a Hispanic man, but it is great. It's called We're Not Broken.
Great.
By Eric Garcia. It's all, I bookmarked it for
see.
But it's all about autism portrayals in media, as well as how he interviews several people from several different walks of life about like several different ethnicities, ages, genders.
Great.
And he asked them what it was like for them.
And Anna, you control no one, you influence everyone. You get to choose the kind of influence you want to be. Anna Charest, what kind of influence do you want to be?
I want people to know that autistic people's voices are valid and that we come from all different walks of life. And when you understand us for who we are, instead of what, like, you know, instead of just our diagnosis, you can really see who we are and see what we're capable of. And our value is not defined by society, but by ourselves.
Terrific. Really looking forward to seeing the documentary. Everyone, thank you so much for coming tonight. It's been a great education. Good night, everyone.